Over my nose. I got a 10 stitches over my eye.
That's as bad as the story I had to tell about my broken wrist, and everybody said, well, how'd it happen? How'd it happen? I turned in the bush and caught my leg, and I took the foot in front of me. So I actually developed about 10 stories, so depending on the audience, I tell a different one for each.
Are you going to blame me for it here?
No. I was on a show with Brett yesterday, Inside OC. But I thought they did a pretty good job on the makeup.
He did a great job. I mean, you had no black eyes, and your
It's a raccoon man over here.
Yeah.
What happened? I never even noticed. I wasn't looking.
I know.
Come on, Merle. Kathy, what I'd like to say is I got, after the last meeting, I got caught in the parking lot.
Or maybe it was
But you should see the other guy.
Yeah.
But actually, what I did is I fell off a ladder. I was.
Here, maybe I thought it was from the courthouse battle you had.
It could have been.
Fell off a ladder mouth.
Well, very carefully.
Well, he was saving his wife so she wouldn't fall off.
But she was.
Which he was
My
being
wife was
chivalrous.
climbing up the ladder to go up and hose down some of the ants that were invading our building, so we have high ceilings. So,
Okay, good morning. Welcome to the.
Coach, you do it. I climbed back there.
Well, it's 8:30. We need to start. No, mine says 8:30, so we go with that. That one is slow. This is the joint planning meeting between Orange County Water District and MoDOT. First item, any public comments? Any members of the public wishing to address any items not appearing on the agenda? Mr. Earl.
Yeah, I'd like to. There are a lot of people who have been really interested in the Poseidon issue recently, and it's been stirring up a lot of controversy in Huntington Beach discussion forums online. And in fact, that's one of the reasons that Councilman Eric Peterson appeared at the last OCWD meeting, so he could talk about Poseidon and talk about his opposition to that project. And so, a lot of people who have been reading my stories on some of these forums have asked me, well, how do we get to the meetings, or how do we see them, and so on. And I was talking yesterday to one person about that, and I said, well, he wanted to voice his concerns about the project. And so I said, well, you can come to the meeting, the joint meeting tomorrow. They'll be discussing Poseidon, as they almost always do at this meeting. And I said, well, it's really hard for me. I'm disabled, and it's really hard for me to get my body going in the morning, so I can't really be there. And so I said, well, I'll try live streaming it for you, but, they don't have live streaming. And, my version of live stream is kind of rinky-dink. You can see it right here. And not as good as like South Orange County Water District, where they have a great setup there. And in keeping with the spirit of the Brown Act and so on, at least. And so I thought, there are a lot of people like this gentleman who can't be here for various reasons at this meeting and other meetings, and they'd like to see it live streamed, watch it from home, and they'd like to see or at least even the archives of those meetings. And they'd like to see, for example, when I was speaking at the last OCWD meeting, Director Green, and I asked a question about why a certain item was on the consent calendar wherein money was being given to the Orange County Register editor on their board, and the Register regularly writes and supports about and supports the Poseidon project and all that. And I just want to know who put that item on there. I asked that, and I couldn't get an answer from anyone. I'd still like to get an answer for that. But I think the public ought to be able to see when their representatives don't answer basic questions like that. Or when they do talk about issues, they say the same misstatements of facts over and over again about the Poseidon project, like, we can't buy water and stuff like that. And I think they ought to be able to see that. And, even all the people who might be for the project have a right to see what's going on here, too. So And this guy was saying, well, why don't they have public streaming? You know, like the city council does, like the South Orange County Water District and so on. Well, why can't that be done? And why do all of you on both boards? I'm speaking primarily, I guess, to the OCWD because I've been involved watching them more lately, but it applies to both of you, really. I mean, why do you keep ignoring this issue? Every single government agency in the country practically now has live streaming, except for a lot of the water districts. The Met has it, South Orange County has it, and so on. But you guys just keep ignoring that all the time. Now, why is that? I'd like an answer, please, from my representative on the OCWD Water Board. Thank you, Director Green.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to comment? Director, President Netterhood.
Yeah, Al Nettergood, President of the Board for Yorba Linda Water District. I'm here today, not in that position, but as a citizen. And Poseidon is probably going to continue to be the hot topic of the day, the week, and the month, with good reason. Obviously, it deals with water, which is critically important. The Poseidon thing is incredibly expensive. And for those of you, and many of you were there last Wednesday, one of the things that concern me as a citizen and as a board member is the financial analysis that goes into these types of decisions. The analysis that I saw, and I'm using that term very broadly, that was presented to the OCWD board, I thought lacked detail, it lacked accuracy, and it lacked immediacy. It used $1,800 an acre foot as the expected cost for water out of Poseidon. What they didn't highlight is that included the questionable LRP funding from Met of $475 an acre foot, and the analysis itself didn't include the OCWD water that is currently provided at significantly less cost than that. So I think for transparency, for understanding, for effectiveness, it's really critical that as we discuss this really serious topic, that the numbers be presented in a serious and complete fashion that is an adequate representation of what is likely to happen. That includes appropriate inflation factors, since this plan isn't going to come online for at least 2 or 3 years. So if you take the $1,800, take out the $475, you're looking at almost $2,300. The San Diego plant's at $2,400 an acre foot. That's a real life example. You had a couple of 3% inflation factors. My best guess is the Poseidon water is going to cost, without the LRP, a minimum of $2,500 an acre foot. I didn't see any representation of that number, any presentation of what that ramps up to as far as significance. And I would just challenge the folks that support Poseidon to be to have a sharper pencil and a clearer presentation of the financial impact. Because as a public citizen, as a taxpayer, that's where my focus is. I want the water, for sure, but is it worth paying for? And given the reality of what's going to be coming down, we need to see those clearly. The decision needs to be made on clearly defensible and presented numbers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on. Any items received too late to be agendized? Any items distributed less than 72 hours? Okay. Let's go on to item 1, update on California water.
Mr. Chairman, I did include an informational item that was from MOLEX PMA packet. The copies over there for the audience and the members in attendance today regarding the status of the reliability study.
So will that be posted on our website?
Yes.
As well? Because it's not up there yet. Okay. Thank you. Kevin, you want to give us an update on water? That would be you, right?
Yeah, but
It says Kevin Husker, water.
are we going to?
Oh, I'm sorry, update California water fix. Who's doing that? Do we have a presentation on that, or is Harvey doing it, or what's?
Damon's doing it.
Don't look
Or Melissa? Or Damon, are you doing it?
No, I'm first.
I'm just running errands for my guy.
It looks like Damon's going to do it.
Well, that is our full-time job. Two things for Mary Beth, so. Yes,
And it is
Melissa.
just an oral update.
Okay.
So a quick oral update on the California water fix. So far, there have been 9 agencies that have taken, public agencies that have taken board action in consideration for the 67% of the state water project participation level. So those boards are only taking action at their state water project shares. The Delta Conveyance Design and Construction Authority. Thank you. The Delta Conveyance Design and Authority meeting of July 19th, which was their second meeting, was held up in Sacramento. I believe it was last Thursday?
Last Thursday, Public Library, JPM.
That's right. And at that meeting, they approved their 2018-2019 budget, which is $133 million. Something of interesting note within that budget is there is a 6-month contingency that's included in there of about $42 million. And then on that same day, there was the first Finance Authority meeting, held actually a little bit earlier in the morning at 11. And that is a single-purpose public entity to issue, sell, and deliver bonds, refunding bonds or notes. And there was a question asked yesterday at Metropolitan whether that JPA, the finance JPA, would also be used for the unsubscribed portion of Metropolitan's share for the bonds. And actually, the answer is that they're going to be looking at what is the most cost-effective manner for that unsubscribed portion. With regards to the unsubscribed portion, they are still in negotiation with DWR on the master agreement. Until the master agreement is complete, they are unable to move forward on finishing up the offering the agreements for the unsubscribed portion. So far, we know about one agency that is interested in moving forward with the unsubscribed portion currently. So 200 out of 3,000.
Okay. Any comments, questions?
I think they also hired the Hallmark Group to act as the back office agency for that. And I think Randy was elected president.
That's right. He is Randy Record, who is the current chairman of the Metropolitan Board, is serving as the Metropolitan representative on the Finance JPA, and he is going to be the president of that. And they have Brian Thomas as their interim executive director.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Does that mean it runs through the Southern Nevada Water Authority?
Well, I mean, on anyone new, I guess. Okay, let's go on to item 2, status of imported water supplies. Thank you, Melissa.
Good morning, everyone. There's some new people in the audience. I'll just introduce myself. My name is Kevin Husser. I'm the Water Resources Analyst here at MODOC. Let's first start looking at region weather and water supply conditions. So let's look at Northern California accumulated precipitation for this water year, which goes from October to September. Sometimes people get a little confused. The water year and a fiscal year, the fiscal year goes from July to June, so the water year is just slightly adjusted or slightly pushed up ahead. So right now, as of 2 days ago, the accumulated precipitation for the Northern California, basically the State Water Project watershed, was 40.8 inches, and that is 83% of normal. And as you can see, we're in the summer months, and historically, we don't really receive rain from basically May to the end of October, or to the beginning of October. So probably this number probably won't change much from now until next November when the rains begin up again. And then just going over our the state Table A allocation for this year, 2018, you can see we started out with a 15% allocation way back in November, and we kind of hovered around 15-20%, and we had a minor March miracle that kind of helped us boost it up to 35%, and what that means is almost about 700,000 acre feet to Metropolitan in supplies for this year. And you can kind of see where we've been in previous years. So in the drought, 2014, extremely low, 2015 low, and then we finally had that greater, well, we had 2016 was still part of the drought, and then we had the year that ended the drought. So you can kind of see the last 5 years. And just what does that do with Metropolitan storage at the end of the year? So this is Metropolitan's dry year storage going back to 2006. And as see, last year, after that wet year, we ended the year with 2.5 million acre feet in storage. And based on preliminary estimates, demand and supply needs, we're actually looking at ending the year with 2.5 million acre feet in storage. So very good, given the dryness that we've seen, not just up north was a little below average, but down here, as Orange County Water District is well aware, we had about 3.5 inches of rain down here. And then the Colorado River Basin has been really dry. So with all that said, we basically made out this year. We broke even, and if next year's really wet, that's great. We can store more water. We can hopefully get above that 2.7. But if next year's dry, we have plenty to take out of our reserves. So just something to think moving forward. And then I just wanted to show the drought monitor. This is something I don't show too often, and this is kind of because there's always I was at my eye doctor the other day. He's like, "Oh, we're back in drought." And I was like, "Yeah, but we have plenty of water in supply right now." And when people refer to drought, they're usually referring to the drought monitor. And you can see here, obviously, the yellow is the less intense drought, and then the dark red is the more intense. You can see the Four Corners, Colorado River Basin has been seeing really, really dry conditions. And if you look at California, I'll move over to California. You can see California's still in really good shape. It doesn't visually look that great, but basically the yellow is just dry conditions. It's abnormally dry. It's not necessarily suggesting it's in drought, but the tannish and the red are the more drought-driven characteristics, and you can see extreme drought, but no exceptional drought. And an interesting fact is that Orange County has still been in drought basically since 2011, so we never actually got out of that last drought.
Just clarification, Kevin, my understanding when they color in those areas, they do not take into account, for example, the prior slide you just showed, they don't take into account that Met has 2.5 million acre feet in storage, and so, we would look at that amount of water in storage at Met and say, well, in Southern California, we're probably have no chance of going into allocations for 2 or 3 or 4 years, something like that.
Yeah, this is based on hydrological conditions. So this is, if it's, we've only had above average rain in Southern California once in the last 7 years. So that's pretty dry.
Yeah, I think we have to be careful in our messaging, because even on that map, Orange County is designated as severe drought. So to say that, we're not in drought, I think sends the wrong messaging. It certainly has an impact on the groundwater basin, because we rely a lot on incidental recharge, which is just natural rainfall. And when we don't get that natural rainfall, it does have an impact on water supply conditions in Orange County. So I think you have to be very clear to draw the distinction between the local message and the statewide message.
Yeah. No.
Kevin, this is purely precipitation, correct?
Yeah, it's
It's based on average precipitation by day or by week or by month versus what's actually occurring.
yes,
during
and
the time.
let me get to my next slide. This is the drought conditions historically going back to the year 2000. And as you can see, the western United States is dry, and we see drought conditions that we never go out of drought conditions. So this is the western United States, this is where we are today, and this is California. So the beginning of the millennia, we great conditions. We went through a dry period, and we had great conditions again. Went through another dry period, and then we had the mega drought that started in 2012, and you can see how intense it got, and then it dropped off, and then we're kind of creeping back in. Now, will we be in another mega drought? I don't know, probably not, but this is kind of the trend that California has gone through for the last 15, 16, 17 years.
It's been that way for the last 100 years.
Yes, there are probably since, that's the part of the world we live in. And just look at California on a satellite image. It's not green, it's brown. So that's basically all I have. I'll just conclude. Mr. Swan.
Well, if you go back to your allocation, your storage, your storage. Here we are, we are allocated 35%, and close to normal year, water year, we're taking 900,000 roughly from the Colorado Aqueduct, and we didn't draw storage at all. We only get 35% of the supply on the state water project. We're using roughly 900,000 on the Colorado Aqueduct. And we did not draw down storage, nor was there any lack of water available to anyone who wanted to buy it, to the best of my knowledge. Anyone who wanted to buy water could get as much water this year and last year and the year before, except for a short time, you know, every single year. Okay, it's something to look at. Only 35%. Only 900,000 in the Colorado Aqueduct, and we did not draw on storage in a very dry year.
Okay, so just summing everything up, it was slightly below average in regards to accumulated precipitation in Northern California. California, I didn't show it, but Northern California snowpack this year was well below average. It was like 43%. Precipitation in Southern California has been well below average this year, and it's been below average 6 out of the last 7 years. Key state and federal reservoirs are kind of leveling at their historical averages. I know they've been drawing a lot of water out of San Luis right now, but that's normal for this time of the year. And Oroville's obviously was drawn down last year to avoid using the spillway this year. And then allocations at 35%. Drought conditions have strengthened this year because it's been dry, but relatively weak compared to the last drought. And the Colorado River system still in decline, and Lake Mead could possibly see a shortage triggered by the calendar year 2020. And the last time I checked, that was about a 52% chance. And with that, I will answer any questions. And this is a aerial view of the Oroville spillway last week. So they're getting the structural concrete in, and hopefully they'll be ready to go this winter. So.
Okay, Director Dick had a comment.
Well, I agree with what has been said, and Director Swan is perfectly correct. However, that was at the end of the year. In the earlier part of the year, we did draw against the storage. We did wind up at a wet year. Los Angeles didn't pull against the Met the way they have for many years because they roll on and off, as you remember. And they had such a surplus, they were looking to add it to anyone who accepted because they were taking water. But you are 100% correct. At the end of the year, everything balanced out just fine. It was certainly nice to have that savings account to draw against when we needed advance of that water.
Absolutely agree.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay, let's move on. Item 3, status of the MoDOC Orange County water reliability study. Carl, I would assume that's you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anybody didn't pick up a copy? This is a July 2nd item with our P&O committee. Anybody needed? And what I presented to the committee at that time was the schedule for the completion of the study. And if you take a look at what I said in here to the committee, and then I had some verbal comments that augmented that, we're behind the schedule that I laid out in here. We've been working hard on the reliability study for a number of months, trying to drive it to the completion. Met this little curve with the water fix decision, and we had to sort through and get that out. We've been collecting information on local projects. That information's been coming in slowly. We have now received all the information. We're in the process of reviewing, dissecting, holding meetings to confirm information. So my intentions are to drive this to completion as soon as possible, with the caveat that we want to try to be clear with what we're putting out and what the implications are and all that. So I'm hoping to have that information pulled together by the end of August. We will, along the way, be briefing our agencies and our committee and anybody who wants to be included in the process, the way we worked this the last time with the 2016 Orange County Reliability Study update is we held workshops with our member agencies as a first stop to have them digest the detailed information and QC it and provide us feedback that could be presented better, or if they had questions or concerns that need to be chased down. We wanted to have that process occur with the technical representatives from our agencies. So that's the update. If you have any questions on anything presented in the write-up, I'm hoping within the next month we will be able to have this information in a format that we can hold a workshop with our agencies, come out of that with this, and proceed ahead. So I'd be happy to respond to any questions anybody might have on their schedule.
Any board here?
Yes, Carl. At the OC Water Summit, which was tremendous, and I appreciate all the work you guys did on it, we had a representative from San Diego say that they're going to roll off 190,000 acre feet of net supply in the next decade, which is going to free up 190,000 additional acre feet of water for the Met system. LA, Mayor Garcetti is talking about doing a similar thing. Is that taken into consideration? I mean, Orange County would be 20% of the Met water supply, so if they roll off 190,000, that would be 36,000 acre feet of additional net supply that would pro rata be available to Orange County if they did it just San Diego, not counting what LA would do. That's a big number. Is that in your numbers?
As Director Swan points out, the difficulty and one of the challenges of doing a reliability study is in Southern California, we all fall under the MET umbrella of their integrated resources plan. So you have to not only look at what's going on in your own service area, you need to keep an eye peeled as to what's going on within MET and within the MET service area. So we include in this analysis what we call scenario planning scenarios as to what we think will be developed. So yes, we do have an estimate as to what we believe, what local projects will be developed within the MET service area. We do it quite different than the way MET does it in their IRP. MET only counts on in their IRP projects that are under construction or under design. We take a little more progressive look at the projects that we think will come online. For example, the San Diego Pure Water Project we think has a high likelihood of moving forward. And there are a number of other projects, including the LA San Fernando groundwater basin cleanup. I will say that we do not agree with all of the claims being made by all the MET member agencies. For example, if you read some of the material from the city of LA, it would appear that they would get off of the MET system by 50% or more. Similarly, with the San Diego information, we're not sure they will develop all the local projects, and the Pure Water Project will develop to the ultimate size of that. So there is some give and take in the analysis, and that's part of that QC process. Is we will put out our forecast and prognosis, and then give people an opportunity to provide input and suggestions in that. And that was really beneficial last time through with this, because there is not only one answer and one solution. There is forecasting the future is very difficult, and that's why we're trying to be very careful and thoughtful in the process.
What are the demand forecasts? I mean, are they upward sloping significantly when historically they've been downward sloping?
Within the metropolitan service area, they are somewhat upward sloping. In Orange County, they peak in 2025 and then are downward sloping out to 2040 or to 2050.
Okay.
Could you maybe identify for the group, Carl, with some of the key elements of this phase of the feasibility study, what you're looking at. Because we completed the feasibility study a couple of years ago, and this is just kind of
Yeah.
building on that work.
Right, so, 2016, we completed and published the 2016 reliability study. That study had, demand projections that were developed, a while ago. It also had, older, climate forecast information, and it had older information on the Colorado River. So for this update, we wanted to key in on a couple of things. The main thing was to look at a more severe climate scenario as to what might happen to the state water project supplies and what might happen to the Colorado River supplies. Once again, when you're looking at Colorado River supplies, then that triggers or potentially triggers the drought contingency shortage provisions, which have not been adopted, so we've made an assumption as to how we think those will come out. So I will say the forecast on the Colorado River supplies is more severe than what we did in the 2016. The other issue that we were asked to look at by our board was whether additional storage reservoirs in Southern California would be beneficial in capturing water in wet years and holding that and providing it out in dry years. So it's another part of the analysis. And then the main part for Orange County is to take a closer look at the local projects that are called out on page 2 of the memo. More specifically, we'll take a look at the Carson IPR project, the Poseidon, the Doheny, San Juan Watershed, Cadiz, Strand Ranch Water Bank, and the South Orange County Interconnection project, to look at the costs and benefits of those projects. And we will be ranking and evaluating those projects, develop, in our estimation, where they fit in Orange County's water future.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay, let's go on, item 4, update on storage discussions within OCWD Basin. I guess that's, you come from this Roy Herndon.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, I'm Roy Herndon with Orange County Water District, and just briefly, earlier this year there had been some interest by a South County water agency, I think it's Multi-Gel, to explore the possibility of storing some water, or working out some kind of water storage arrangement with OCWD. That generated interest by a number of folks on the board, OCWD board, and our producers to reevaluate our basin storage policy and really how much storage do we have available for any kind of individual accounts. And so it really made sense because a lot of our storage policies were developed back in the 2007 timeframe. There's a lot of things that have changed since 2007, so it made sense to go back and take a look at our current policy. So this schematic, I'll walk you through it, but this is essentially a representation of the. Oh, yes, sir. Yes.
Is this going to be posted on our website as well as this presentation?
We'll definitely make sure you get a copy. So yeah.
Yeah, it should be posted.
Absolutely.
Around
We will make sure of that. So yes, this is a representation of the operating range of our basin, 0 to 500,000 acre feet of accumulated overdraft is kind of it's been our operating range since we established it officially back in 2007. And we have a number of triggers, and I'll start with kind of our happy range. This is our target range here where we would like to be between 100 and 150,000 acre feet. If we're in this green zone, we're not looking at filling the basin anymore. We'd like to try to stay within that range if we're there. So no change in the basin pumping percentage. We would continue to buy enough imported water to make sure we balance pumping and recharge, other sources of recharge. So essentially try to maintain zero storage change if we're fortunate enough to be in this range. As you move down, increasing the overdraft, entering into a drought situation, our goal would be to try to get back up to this range by trying to maintain, of course, the 75% BPP, which is also a policy goal of the board, OCWD board, and buy enough imported water and reducing, with the goal of reducing overdraft based on pumping projections. So demand is very key in estimating future pumping. And so our goal is to continue to maintain a VPP if we're within this range down to 300,000 acre feet from a full condition. Now, if we get past 300,000, if we're, despite our best efforts, say we're having a series of dry years, storage continues to drop. Our goal at 300,000 would be to try to increase our recharge purchases from Metropolitan if there's water available and maintain the VPP at 75%. But say if there weren't enough imported water to purchase additional import water, the board may consider also potentially reducing the VPP. Some combination of those two to try to reduce the overdraft and get us heading back in the direction we'd like to head. Again, if even those measures were unsuccessful and we drop below 350,000 acre feet, then the policy says that the board would also, again, try to purchase additional imported water to try to get the basin to reduce the overdraft, and rather than and/or, it's and we would reduce the VPP. Some combination of those two to try to climb out and not try to get down to 500,000 acre feet. And it's something, it's important to note that we still have the Met Cup storage account, storage program. There's very little water in this program right now. It's almost empty, but we have to make sure we have adequate room for that program. And coming up perhaps next year, the SARCUP program is a new program where the district can potentially purchase and acquire surplus state project water through San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District and get some of that water into the basin for a maximum of 36,000 acre feet. We couldn't get that in 1 year. It would take a number of years because we're limited. I forget how much per year, like 3,600, or I forget what it's not a lot. So it would take a number of years of surplus state water to get up to 36,000. But we have to consider the storage needs for these two programs. The Met Cup program ends in 2028, so it's got another 10 years to go. So the questions that we have to answer in looking at our basin storage policies are, well, how much storage do we need for a drought? I mean, that's an absolutely key question, is what do we need to get us through the next drought? We just came through a really bad drought. What's the next one going to look like, and are we positioned properly to handle that next drought? And is there then any storage space remaining for other programs or individual agreements if the board would be interested in that? So these are key questions that we looked at. So just to go back to the 2012 to 2016 drought, it's a 5-year drought. Maybe it started in the end of 2011, but it's called the 2012-2016 drought. A very, very dry situation, driest or second driest in Southern California since the 1400s, according to a study published by the Department of Water Resources. So it was a very severe drought, 55% of average rainfall. We noticed definite reductions in our Santa Ana River storm flows and that we were able to capture, and certainly less natural incidental recharge that gets into the basin. So those really impacted us, of course, which you didn't normally do during a drought. And in the 5th year of that drought, Met reduced its deliveries to us, so we couldn't buy our normal 65,000 acre feet of Met water. But on the flip side, the governor did require the 25% conservation, mandatory conservation, which kind of offset the reduced demand, which reduced pumping. So that sort of, in a way, offset some of the impacts in that last year. So despite all of the severity of that drought, we only lost about 161,000 acre feet of storage. I mean, that's a significant amount of storage, but still, we were well within our operating range of the basin. This is a time series graph going back to 1970 or 69 of showing our storage going up and down. And you can see we've been through a number of dry cycles. And so our policies have been good. Even back to the 70s and 80s, the district has been able to benefit from wet periods purchasing additional imported water when available, and ride out a number of droughts. In fact, if about 16,000 acre feet of withdrawals from the CUP program, Met CUP program, had not occurred, we would have only lost about 145,000 acre feet during the drought. So that's definitely, I think that's a good indication that our policies have worked. They worked during a severe 5-year drought, and so that's a good thing. But we went ahead and said, okay, so what if we have another drought? You know, same kind of hydrology as the 2012-2016 drought, but let's update that to today's conditions, because actually during 2012 through 2016, base flows of the Santa Ana River were dropping, and demands were dropping. So if base flows are dropping, that's bad on the supply side, but demands were gradually going down as well, which helps to offset that slightly. But GWS came online in 2008, and off by a year there. And so we have to take that into account in our drought scenarios. And so we adjusted our demands and supplies. We ran 3 different scenarios. The second scenario was we would repeat the drought, but in this case, the state would not reduce its water demands by 25% in year 5. So that sort of helped us that last year. Well, let's assume they don't do that and people continue to pump and use water in the 5th year of the drought as they normally would have. And that we would actually cut back net deliveries, not just in the 5th year, but years 4 and 5. So we sort of, this is a worst case, number 2, than scenario number 1. And then we did one more scenario where it was essentially the same as scenario 2, but we extended it for 2 more years. We just said, okay, the drought ends after the 5th year, but let's say in years 6 and 7, there was still diminished availability of net water in years 6 and 7. So let's just play that out for 2 more years. So this graph shows the effect. This is the base case is no drought, and under our normal, if we started it where we currently are today, we estimate we're around 287,000 acre feet of overdraft. So not a bad condition. We're in pretty good shape right now. We did a permitted loop program this year, so we're in pretty good shape. But our goal, given that our place that we'd like to be is between 100 and 150,000 acre feet, our goal is to gradually get back to that condition. And so, assuming we don't have a drought in the future, we project that we will work our way back to that level eventually. But the 3 scenarios we ran were under a drought situation. So the first one, the red line is underneath this purple line, scenario 1. So we go through the drought. However, remember that in the 5th year of the drought, this is year 5, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th year of drought, that's where demands got reduced by 25%. So that actually, we recovered the basin a bit in that 5th year, and that's what this scenario shows. So if you start at 287,000 and under scenario 1, you'd end up at about roughly 100,000 acre feet lower. Then scenario 2, the green scenario, which is again underneath the purple line, in that 4th year, net supplies begin to be reduced. And then the 5th year, the net supplies purchases are reduced even more, and there is no 25% reduction, conservation, mandatory use reduction. So the basin dropped in that 5th year compared to this first scenario. But then in the next 2 years, we're out of the drought, but net is still not giving us as much water as we would like as our 65,000 normal amount. So basically, that indicates that we would just kind of ride steady for that last 2 years. Not go below 500,000. That's our goal. Not to get below 500,000.
Go ahead, question.
Yeah, sure.
Does that include the final expansion coming online in 2023?
Not yet. We actually didn't assume that yet, but that's important to know. So then the last scenario, I'm sorry, that was scenario 3, is if there was no reduced net availability in the last 2 years, 6 and 7, even though we're out of the drought. There's sort of a net drought hangover, I guess. But essentially, if we were able to get back onto our normal net purchases at the end of the drought, we would begin to recover, just like we showed here and here. So that would be the normal situation. We would begin to come back towards our preferred target area. So the conclusion is.
Roy, can you
Yes, sir.
Pierre has a question?
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to ask the MODOC people, other than the period of time at Lake Matthews when they were having outlet structure, no problems, was there ever, any protracted period of time where Met was not able to deliver water to you if you paid the full service rate? Whether it's full service untreated or full service treated, was there ever a time in the last 20 years, other than that short time, that you couldn't buy all the water you needed to keep the basin within 150,000 acre feet of full? Was there ever a time in the last 20 years?
A couple of years ago when the hydrology dropped because we had to send some out to other parts of the service area.
That was, I think, what he's referring to as the Colorado.
Right. The Lake Matthews problem where we were shifting all the water up into,
Bring to LA.
but other than that, in the last 20 years, there was not a time you would have to pay full service rates, which is a whole lot, that's half the cost of desal, by the way. But there was never a time in the last 20 years, except for that one time, where there wasn't as much water as you wanted from Met. Met had 900,000 acre feet in storage at the last year. You couldn't buy the cheapy water because they only make cheapy water available when they have an excess. Was there any time in the last 20 years you couldn't have done it other than that one time at Lake Matthews?
I think the answer to your question is,
No.
could you have?
Yeah.
Would it be outside the allocation plan? Yes, it would. You would have paid the substantial surcharge. That would have been much more expensive. And of course, if everybody in Met took that approach, then the answer would be no, but people stay in their allocation. In this case, in our last allocation,
Answer the question I asked.
here, I am asking the question, but I'm answering it in full so that people understand. And I don't know if Roy's included this in this information, but in the last allocation, because the state asked for cuts much greater than Met did, we were actually able to provide water to OCWD, and Kevin or Harvey, the actual amount delivered.
50,000.
So out of the 65,000, that's the budgetary plan, 50,000 of that was, so it's not a simple yes or no. The simple answer would be, yes, you can pay a penalty and get the water. The more complete answer is, if everybody did that, then the water would not be there.
But Rob, we were only in allocation that 1 year where they had the penalty that we were even close to that. So in the last 20 years, substantially all of the time,
How many allocations have we had in the
95% of
last
the
20
time,
years?
you could have bought as much water as you wanted if you paid full service.
So under the last time we had an allocation, okay,
1 year.
we've been in allocations in essence three times. The first time when allocations were implemented, they were two years. This issue really was not a prevalent issue at that first time. The second time, which lasted just 1 year, the question was raised in regards to replenishment purchases.
I didn't talk about replenishment, I talked about full service.
That at the time, maybe the words I'm not used to correct is referencing full service replenishment deliveries. There was a program that was set up to handle water agencies' needs. Water was delivered to Orange County Water District simply because we were able to pool the resources together to ensure that water could be delivered. However, you asked the question, did Orange County get every single drop that they exactly needed and they called for? The answer is no. They did not get every single drop that they asked for. There was a program put in place. They were eligible for the program. They chose not to take it. They chose to simply take water that was left on the table, which satisfied pretty much most of their needs. Did they get every single drop? No. That's why Rob is saying it's not a simple yes or no answer. They received water, but in essence, they didn't get the full 65 that they wanted. It's a special program that was set up for that case, and again, they were eligible. There were circumstances that in essence had to maintain groundwater production at a certain level. In essence, it was not, that's their choosing. They voluntarily choose not to participate in the program, but they still receive water close to 50,000 acre feet. So 50 versus 65, you can look at it from both sides.
To be fair with Pierre's initial question, if OCWD had said, we want the additional 15,000 acre feet and paid the penalty,
They could have done that.
they
Absolutely.
could have gotten that water. But if everybody does that, obviously it won't be available.
Was MoDOT in penalty, or close to penalty?
That's why we were able to make 50,000 acre feet available to OCWD. Everybody conserved water and we were not close to being in penalty.
They were not close to being penalty, so I think that.
Well, we would have been in penalty if OCWD had taken additional
You're talking about
15,000 acre
1
feet.
year out of 20 years. The point is, we need a graphic.
Because that was your question.
No, I said in 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah. To be fair, yeah.
But 1 year in 20 years, we need a graphic that shows how much water was available from Met. You know, if you wanted to pay full service instead of cheapy water, the basin should have been full and maintained close to full the entire time. You know, and I would, you know, challenge you to show that, you know, that I'm on.
Debbie?
You know, the bigger problem, and I sat through, I think, at least the last 8 years of listening to the RA debate in April that the agency has. They're really, it's the unwillingness for them to fund more money toward the purchase of water. They're always hoping for rain. So it's really almost, I mean, Pierce, yeah, it's, the issue really is that they're not willing to buy the water. In fact, they squabbled over just a few dollars at the last one, and hence the staff has to make cuts to other things. So I think this is, you know, if I want to hear all the facts. I want to hear the whole story, the complete story, not what's just been narrowed down because you're trying to please board members.
Okay.
Thank you. So, basically the summary is that even under a severe drought situation, even with a 2-year extension of reduced net water availability for purchase for recharge, we estimate 180,000 acre feet of storage decrease in that situation. Which again, if you start under where we are now, not at the full basin or even up in our target range, but down close to 300,000, we project that we would still be within our operating range, which is a good thing. So our findings are that lower water demands over the last 10 years certainly have helped. If water demands had continued to go up 10% a year, like they used to way back when, that would be a whole different scenario. But given that water demands have been on their way down, that certainly helps us get through drought situations. GWRS, the final expansion, will be coming online in 2023. That's going to add another 30,000 acre feet or so of water. That's going to continue to increase our drought resiliency. So we think we're well positioned for the future droughts, just as we were in the last one.
Well, I was thinking, what's your assumption on that blue line? What are you assuming?
This is assuming that we have average hydrology. So this is the blue line is a base case, not in a drought situation. These other ones are a drought situation. So the hydrology here would be we'd be getting average storm flow, average incidental recharge. We'd be getting our 65,000 acre feet a year of Met. We'd be pumping 75% basin pumping percentage, and demands would only be gradually going up. It varies ever so slightly, not significantly. And with those conditions, we should gain every year in storage. Yeah.
So if you had a really wet year, you would...
It would do this, exactly. You get to your target faster, and then you could, either increase the basin pumping percentage, reduce your net purchases, whatever, if you got up into that high range. So our recommendations, we're going to be taking this item back to our Water Issues Committee in August 8th, and our recommendations at this point are that that we consider lowering the accumulated overdraft target by about 50,000 acre feet. We think the basin could easily handle a slight reduction of 50,000 acre feet in our various target levels and still not jeopardize any drought preparedness based on the projections that we've done. But we don't believe there should be any change in the 500,000 acre foot floor for our operating range. Doesn't mean that we, in an absolute emergency, if we got down to 500,000 acre feet, and we had to temporarily draw water even more than that. If it's a short period of time, that's probably not an issue either. But as a goal, we should stay above 500,000 acres. And as far as storage agreements, we believe that the SARCUP program, that 36,000 acre feet, we believe any storage agreements should probably stay within that SARCUP range, in that 36,000, that we not necessarily add additional storage agreements beyond the SARCUP program, at least until the MET program, the MET program is in.
Why are we even considering
goes off the
Poseidon if it's what he's saying is true?
So those are our recommendations, and just so you see what we're talking about as far as reducing the target by 50,000. So
Poseidon gives money to board members?
Oh, yeah. 100 to 150,000 would be 150 to 200,000. And these triggers would be dropped by 50,000. 500 stays put. Any questions?
So, question I have, these storage agreements, will producers be able to open storage accounts with OCWD?
Right now, we're not anticipating that. Because of SARCUP gives us, in effect, a dry yield that is used in an allocation, and it's local, so that benefit would be enjoyed by all the producers.
So you're only entertaining storage agreements with folks outside the basin?
No, I mean, we still have to have that discussion with our board. We haven't fully vetted that. One thing that could be done, possibility, is that if the board were to agree or were to want to entertain allowing other agencies to have a portion of SARCUP, of that storage, because it is drier yield, so it is considered an extraordinary supply. That would be something the board would have to take into consideration.
So what if you get a fully subscribed SARCUP amount, would you entertain storage agreements beyond?
Oh, beyond 36,000?
Yeah.
Well, as Roy points out, I mean, that decision wouldn't be made for another 10 years.
Brooke, I was wondering, what are your thoughts on emergency storage for South County? How does that play into it?
Well, that's the existing program that you're referring to. That's a short term. I think the maximum, it's like a 30-day period of draw from the groundwater. And yeah, I think it amounts to 6,000 acre feet or 3,000 acre feet. It's not a significant volume of water from a storage standpoint. So we don't see any effect on that emergency storage arrangement.
And you wouldn't have a problem with 60 days? Because I think that's
We have to look into that. I mean, that's something I think that, again, the discussions have to be had between the two agencies and between our board.
And the other input that we received on that is based on the current status of the IRWD lawsuit. The OCWD directors we met with on that didn't feel comfortable making any changes in that until such time as the IRWD lawsuit is dealt with. So does not interfere with us using the existing storage arrangement, but it would eliminate our ability to extend that until such time as that issue is resolved.
Any other questions from the board? Megan, you good? Bruce? Kathy? Larry? Here.
So Roy, if, say MET was gonna use their CUP program, and they came up and said to OCWD, we want to put 65,000, we're gonna deliver 65,000 acre feet in lieu to you, to your people, at no additional cost over, at no charge right now. We're putting it in the SARCUP program.
You said cup or SARCUP?
No, into the CUP program.
Yeah. Well, first of all, they couldn't do that because contractually they can only put 16,500 in per year.
So there's no risk of, flooding the basin by having them come in any 1 year.
Right.
No, the terms of the cup are they can put in 16,500 per year, and they can extract a maximum of 22,000 out. And right now the cup is empty.
So if the basin was full and they wanted to put additional water in and they had not filled their basin, you could offset their putting in by buying less water at that time. That's what they do in Kern. I mean, they do an exchange.
Yeah, if we're all the way up here, and they don't have any water in their cup account, and they want to put 16,500 acre feet, we could reduce the amount of purchases just to make sure there's room and we don't go above where we want to be as far as storage.
So there's no great risk of filling the basin over 150,000 if OCWD properly manages the basin and offsets their purchases per the policy.
Right.
So they could, you could, in that scenario, make an emergency storage account available without any name on it, and have people pay into that. And fill the basin up to 150 since, OCWD doesn't have the money right now to do that. And if the basin started filling, first you would stop buying that water. And you would take possession of the water that was, above 150,000, sort of the St. Louis rules. So there's no risk to OCWD for filling the basin up to 150, whether they pay for it or other people pay for it, right?
As far as the amount of water in the basin for 100 or 150,000, no, I don't see a risk of overflowing the basin. There's still room, and we thought about that when we first put this policy together, is to make sure we have enough room here if we've got a really wet year, that we don't risk losing water to the ocean unnecessarily. So I think we're still in good shape even out here as far as potential losses. I don't think we have a risk.
Yeah, but if you fill the basin, there are some cities like Huntington Beach and Fountain Valley that water table moves up so much. The swimming pools start coming up, the manholes, everything else. So it is not good to go over that at all for some of our cities because it causes so many problems.
And you would also lose an opportunity that should we have a wet cycle of being able to obtain the very lowest cost water.
Right. Free. Director Jones.
Yeah. Roy, I'm interested in the other end. When you had a couple excursions down below 400,000, what percentage of the wells go dry at that percentage, do you know?
It's a pretty small number. I mean, it's true when we get down to 400,000 acre feet, we do see, hear from some producers. I forgot whether it's Tustin in the past. I think they had a couple of wells that were having trouble, but they've drilled a couple of new wells in the last few years, so they're in better shape than they were 10 years ago. Mesa used to have some wells that would have some drawdown, but again, I think things are better than they were, but I do recall there are a few wells that start to have some issues, but it's a small percentage.
President Netter.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting that between these two policy changes, you're talking about 86,000 acre feet. Not to go back to the subject, but in fact to go back to it, that's 1.5 Poseidon plants. Doesn't that eliminate one of the major arguments for the need for Poseidon, that we need that 56,000 acre feet? Here you've got 1.5 times that just by changing the policy of the basin. How does that fit together?
I stay out of that.
Since we're in a public forum, there are people here that is their pay grade and they could speak to it.
A hex on you.
The Poseidon project doesn't necessarily affect the groundwater basin. I think that comes more from the question of reliability of net sources.
Yeah.
Okay, any other polls up in that horse? Okay. Let's move on to item 5, Poseidon, or any update on that, or nothing move on to item 6?
Actually, just to go over, our board did take action last week. There were 4 major changes in the term sheet. The first being to decouple the cost from the price of net water. So to look at it more like San Diego did, the actual cost of the project plus owner equity. Also, the term was changed from 50 years to either 30 or 35 years. Also, whereas originally we had the cost of electricity in the term sheet that would stay with Poseidon, and we decoupled that also and decided to look at it as far as paying the actual cost of electricity. And the final thing was that what we're trying to do is to have more of the risk shift to Poseidon on the distribution. So we may be looking, instead of taking the price at the fence, also have them give us a price on the distribution. Consider that.
Okay.
Is there a project if there's no LRP?
No, it's very clear in the term sheet that Poseidon does not receive the LRP that the project is going to push.
Okay. Any other, is this a question or a comment?
It's a question.
Okay.
Two things. Is OCWD contemplating getting Poseidon to do something in writing to say that they agree that this is a non-binding agreement?
That's in the term sheet, yes.
Yeah. That as the senior hierarchy of Poseidon issued a letter to you saying that they agree in writing that this is a non-binding agreement. You know, it's been represented that they have, but I haven't seen a letter from them saying that they understand this is a non-binding agreement.
That is contained in the term sheet, which is signed by both parties.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Director Dick.
I just wanted to say that in my opinion, whatever that may be worth, we've got adjudicated basins and we have managed basins. I think the managed basin generates a lot more complexity and a lot more conversation. I think it also generates a lot more opportunity and a lot more, in my estimation, benefit for the people that overlie that basin. It has been a rarity for Met to work with organizations such as OCWD, where CUP programs, et cetera, were utilized with the effectiveness and the overall efficacy that's been achieved with the relationship we've had with OCWD. That doesn't mean that MODOC and OCWD don't quarrel about this, that, or the other thing. But overall, I would have to suggest that we're far better off having these folks in charge of having a managed basin than an adjudicated basin. I think it's something we should always keep a weather eye about, that they maintain that flexibility for the benefit of the residents.
I just have a quick question, Robert.
Yes.
I wonder, in light of the earlier question about the need for Poseidon and the answer that it's a matter of reliability from General Manager Mike Marcus, if he could please define what reliability is in this case, what you mean by that.
Well, and I might have misspoken because part of the water does go into the basin. Part of the proposed water is put 10,000 acre feet into the groundwater basin. So, and it requires that level of treatment in order to inject potable water or recycled water. So part of it does go into the basin with that slightly cut down. The rest of it would just offset net deliveries.
Well, what could you define what you mean when you say it's a matter of reliability for justifying the project?
I'm not justifying the project one way or the other. I'm just saying.
Well, what is reliability? What do you mean by that? Please. It's off-stated. That's why I'm asking.
Well, I think reliability is being able to have water at all times.
And we do.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, Debbie?
Yes, question about Poseidon and whether the district has planning to do a complete EIR on the distribution system and its impacts on the basin.
And right now, we are looking into that. If we do put the responsibility of the distribution back on Poseidon, it would be their responsibility to either do an amended EIR, or if the pipelines stay within the original EIR, then there wouldn't need to be any work done. But obviously, if there's any deviation from the original EIR on the distribution, then there would have to be an amended EIR.
Yeah, I've never seen an EIR done on the distribution system, so.
Oh, I thought it was part of the original.
No, it's not.
Okay, any other comments, questions? We're adjourned.